Hello and welcome to How to Identify the Patterns Keeping You Lonely and Estranged. Hello there, I'm Karen Chaston, and I am so grateful that you are here spending time with me tonight to learn how you can identify the patterns keeping you lonely and estranged. As I said, I'm Karen Chaston, and I am a Beyond Lost expert. Now, I'm pretty sure that that is something that, no one grows up wanting to be. But it was through my own tragic loss events, and I have had many in our lives, as most of us do, that set me on a journey to finding an easier way for us all to learn how to easily move beyond any kind of loss. And it's not easy. I don't know what has brought you here, whether it's been a loss of a loved one or a divorce, a separation, a job loss, your health, your wealth, even your pets. But what I do know is that over the last 2 months, I've had over 1,000 people read my Life After Loss ebook. And the reason why so many people are reaching out and turning up to these events is because it's time. It's time for us all to know how to move beyond loss. And I feel for you. I know what you're going through. I've been there. I have been lost. I've been on my knees looking for a way to get past the grief and the suffering. And I know how horrific it is. So please stay with me. I know I do sometimes have a habit of going over time, but I'm going to share with you what I have found on how you can identify the patterns that are stopping you from finding a better way. And because I understand that life comes up and things like that, I'm going to share with you right now a link to my calendar, so that you can book in to have a gift discovery session with me. And that's right. I do call my Beyond Loss program the gift of loss. And I know it sounds a little unusual, but stay with me and you will discover that there is a way for you to be able to move beyond loss. So what I'm going to do is there you are. Oh yeah, it all popped up really well. Isn't that fantastic? So as I said, tonight is all about assisting you to be able to move beyond whatever loss event has brought you here, to be able to know that you don't have to spend the rest of your days grieving and suffering. You can still honor your past and your everything that has happened and unwrap the gift so that you can have no regrets when you too decide to move on to your next adventure. So have you ever noticed that life is a journey from love to loss and then back to love again? And the fact that none of us have really been taught how to move beyond loss, we sort of get stuck in the loss and we find it really hard to easily move back to love. And if you look at your life, one of the life loss events that most of us seem to have in our life occurs when we're quite young. It could be when we're 3 or 4 or even 5 or 6, when we have started out to venture out of the family home and we've gone to either a preschool or a kindergarten or a daycare. And then we find ourselves then going to big school. And we've created all of these friends, and now we're leaving, and more than likely we're not going to be at the same school with our friends. We've been with them for 2 or 3 years, and now we have to venture off again by ourselves. And you may not remember, but it was a great loss event to have to leave your friends behind and venture off all alone. But because we were young, we just took it in our stride. We just went, okay, this is life, and it's really sad that I'm not going to see my friend every day. But, we can still catch up and outside of school and things like that. So if you feel into what I've just shared with you, think back and you'll sort of know that even though it was a loss, your parents were there and they sort of guided you to let you know that this is just a part of life. You'll have a lot of friends that will come in and out of your life, but you'll meet new ones. Well, I don't want to put down any loss that you've had, but we're going to have many multiple loss events in our lives. And the sooner that we all learn how to move beyond loss, the easier it will be for us to come back to love. And let's face it, isn't love an amazing place to be spending most of our life? And it's not just love of someone else, it's also love of yourself. Because when we do love ourselves, we sort of go above and beyond and we make our life more enjoyable. We do more exciting things. We look after ourselves mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. But we also look after our relationships. And that's what I've found, that when you understand that life is a journey from love to loss and then back to love again, and it's a continual infinity loop of us always doing that. Once we understand that, we can more easily move beyond loss. This is my beautiful son, Dan. Dan was 27 in 2011. And on the 10th of July, my husband and I thought that we were going to wake up to have a lazy Sunday at home. Though within minutes, we were rushing out of the back door, looking at Dan lying there in the fetal position with saliva coming out of his mouth. Dan, 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 wake up, wake up. We tried. We called the paramedics, and within minutes, they just arrived and they just looked at him for a second and they turned to me and they said, "I'm sorry, madam, he is dead." We thought a healthy 27-year-old boy had gone out the night before with his mates. This was the last thing any of us expected in our life. But me, being my tough CFO, ambitious self at the time, I went straight back to work after his funeral, eating more, drinking more, and working even harder. That's what we're told to do, aren't we? Keep busy. Give it time. Everything will be okay. This is my 2007 passport photo. So 4 years before Dan passed, this is what I looked like. As you can see, I'm carrying more weight. I went and had my photo taken for my passport and my lipstick isn't even on properly. But more importantly, if you look into my eyes, you can see that it looks like Karen has left the building. I wasn't living and loving my life. Though on the outside, everyone was looking at me going, wow, look at Karen. Look how successful she is. She's got the career, she's got the family, she's got the house, the overseas trips. She's got doing really, really well. But all you had to do is look at me. You can clearly see that I wasn't doing very well. When I look at that photo, I honestly feel I was a heart attack waiting to happen, a stroke or type 2 diabetes. And that's the greatest loss that you can do in your life, is to lose who you are. And that's what most of my clients are saying. I've had this horrific loss event, but what I realized after I've gone through this loss, that actually I wasn't living and loving my life. I had lost me in the process. So maybe that is the gift that I mentioned earlier. This is my 2017 passport photo. Big difference, isn't it? Especially when you consider there's 10 years between those photos. And the one on the right, I'm 10 years older than the one on the left. I think I've gained 20 years. What do you think? So why is there such a difference? Because believe me, I think I look worse than that when Dan passed in 2011. And it took me another 15 months for me to actually stop and to look at my life after Dan passed. But in order for me to do that, another loss event had to come to me. And that came in the form of me choosing redundancy when the company I was working for was merging with another. And they decided to tell me that I wouldn't be CFO anymore, but I'll be doing everything plus more on what I'm doing now. And they forgot to add for 2/3 of your current salary. So that's when I started on this journey, because I decided that, Dan had passed. I'd been made redundant. I'd chosen redundancy. And I sort of knew that if I didn't get out of this days, which I love to call the Groundhog Day days, I was going to have more and more and more loss come to me. So that's when I took the time to actually stop and really deep dive into my life, into everything that had happened at that stage, 55 years of my life. And that's where I came across that I didn't want anyone else to have to suffer the way that I had suffered through all of my loss events. I decided to go looking for a better way to do loss. And that's what this is all about. It's about helping you to identify the patterns that you maybe can also look at all of your loss events in your life and find the gift that they're all actually trying to show you so that you can live and love your life, create a better everyday life. So there's 3 aspects to every relationship. And this is something that I feel that we all know, but we seem to have forgotten. So the first aspect is the physical. And this is the way that we all hang out together, the things we do, the things we say, the way we touch each other. And then there's the emotional. Now, the emotional is all encompassing of all of the good, the bad, the glad, and the sad. And then there's the spiritual. So the spiritual relationship is the intangible part. We know that we're connected to this person, place, or thing. We're just not really sure how or why. We are instantly connected to it. So when a loss event occurs, it's the physical relationship that ends, because we're never going to hang out the way we used to. We're not going to talk to each other the way we did. We're not going to touch each other the way we did. We're not going to do the things we did. And as you can clearly see here, I needed to get back to me to understand this. Because even though Dan had physically left, it was me who had physically left me, if that makes sense, if you look at me. And here's Michelle, right? Michelle, I'm going to talk to you after later, but you can clearly see the clear things between her and me in our before and after shots. So I've got to ask you, have you lost you in your life? Is this what is causing you all the pain and the suffering? Is this why you're stuck? Are you having trouble identifying who you are and who you want to be now? There are over 40 different loss events that can affect our lives, which is huge when you think about it, because this means that we're all going to have multiple loss events throughout our life. And it's quite unusual when you think that most of us have never, ever been taught how to move beyond one, let alone multiple. Here's the list. Have a quick look at the list, because you will see that there's some in that list that are quite unusual. You wouldn't even think of them as loss. but they are a grieving situation. And the fact that we don't understand them as loss, when they come into our lives, that's what gets us stuck. And remember, it's all there to assist you to live and love your life. So it's time for us to look at loss from a completely different perspective. Why do we suffer so much? Why does it have to be so painful? Why? Why can't I easily move on? Well, there's a scientific reason why. And it all comes back to the three aspects of our relationship: the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual. Now, when the loss event occurs, it's the physical relationship that ends. Oh, it's the emotional relationship that causes us all of the pain and suffering. And the reason that it causes us all the pain and suffering is because the physical relationship has ended. And there were things that were done or said or not done or said in that physical relationship that is causing us the angst. Pretty simple, isn't it? And this is what I call the unconscious mind loss loop, because we have a conscious mind and we have an unconscious mind. Okay. Some people, and the unconscious mind is actually made up of your subconscious and your preconscious. And what happens is your unconscious mind remembers every single millisecond of your whole entire life. So it has like a filing cabinet of every single thing that you have done for every single minute, every single millisecond, to be honest, of your whole entire life. That's a lot of milliseconds if you think about it, especially if you're like me at 54 when Dan passed and 55 when I lost my job. So there's a lot of things that are going on in your unconscious mind, and it's actually going around in a loop, and it's looking at every single event, every single time that you had contact in that relationship, that loss event that you have just lost, and it is reviewing it. Oh, why did I say this? Why didn't I say this? Why did they do this? Why didn't they do this? Why didn't we do this? So you're going over and over and over and over and over this in your unconscious mind. But consciously, we're not aware of it. So there has to be a connect between our unconscious and our conscious. And that's where feelings come in. That's our emotions. That's the link. So emotions come into our life to assist us to heal the pain that is coming up from our unconscious mind loss loop. Does that make sense? I know it sounds a little bit unusual, but it's actually so factual. So what it is, right, and it's really important for you to understand this, is our feelings, our emotions are our friends. They actually come to us to say, oh, there's this little event that happened 10 years ago that requires healing. Feel into it, heal it, forgive, apologize or acknowledge. And then the feeling will pass on. And then another feeling will come in. And the same process, feel it, look at it, figure out what it is, heal it, allow it to pass. Emotions, energy, emotion. But because we don't understand this on a logical scenario, this is probably the first time you've even heard about this unconscious mind loss loop, we use all these patterns, these habits to squash our emotions. And therefore, they're not going to go away until you've healed them. And that's what causes us pain. Another thing that causes us pain is Kubler-Ross. Now, I'm not about to knock her research because her research was spot on. She came up with the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And she clearly stated that these are the 5 stages of grief. Now, you're not going to have them in this order, and you're not going to have them only once. They're going to come in and out and all around until you come to acceptance. Now, if you go back to the unconscious mind loss loop, you can clearly see that all of these different emotions can be connected to an event that has happened in that relationship that requires healing. for you to forgive, for you to apologize, or for you to accept, or to acknowledge, I should say. And this is the thing. She's done research that this is the way we've been grieving for centuries and centuries and centuries. The problem is her research was so great that now people are reading these books, comparing their grief and loss to them, and they're coming up with, okay, right, I'm spot on. This is how I'm meant to be. They're still not looking at their emotions. They're still not healing their emotions. They have just decided that this is the way that you grieve. Well, I'm here to tell you it's time for us to grieve a different way. And that's what this is about. As I said, there's 3 aspects to every relationship: the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual. The physical is the only one that's ended. The emotional and the spiritual will live on forever. And it's the emotional part of our relationship that is causing us the pain and suffering. So let's deep dive into the emotional part of any relationship, any loss event that has happened in your life. And guess what? You can heal. I'm not going to tell you it's an easy process, but it's a process that you can do quite quickly. You don't have to allow time to pass. You don't have to put everything on hold your whole rest of your life. You can actually deep dive in whenever you want to, heal the emotional discord that is going on through your body, through your mind, through your soul, and then you can design a life that you can live and love each and every day. It's quite simple, isn't it? Have you ever noticed that most processes in life that actually make the biggest difference are the simple ones? Sometimes we overcomplicate things. We make it so much harder. And because we do that, we actually, most of us, go into avoidance. We have created trillion-dollar industries, pharmaceutical, alcohol industries, just so that we can avoid these emotions. Quite ridiculous when you think about it, when you can actually go, wait on, these emotions are our friends. Let's deep dive into them. Okay. So there's a whole lot of different ways that we can do avoidance. And as you can see, it could be food, alcohol, drug, it could be anger, it could be exercise, it could be working too much. It could be going into isolations, into a Netflix diverge for months and months and years, let's face it, overindulge, underindulge in sex, or you can just go on shopping, like they even call it retail therapy. So how do you do avoidance? Have you ever gone into it? Have you ever looked at how you do avoidance? Believe me, I think most of us will go tick, 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 get 6 out of those 8 easily, because we've created a whole world, a whole industries around it. The only problem is, in us doing that, we've also increased our suicide rate. It's at such high proportions, and it doesn't have to be that way. Once we know how to easily tap into our unconscious mind loss loop and figure it out, what is this emotion about? Can you imagine you're in your 90s? You have lived the most amazing life. You are sitting there, all retired, all ready to go, and you ask yourself this question: did I allow myself to live again after loss? Think about it for a moment. Our whole life, we move from love to loss and back to love again. But so many of us get stuck in the loss that we forget how to get back to love again. We end up not loving our life. We end up, our friendships disappear. Our relationships disappear. Our job disappears. Our health, our wealth. All because we didn't allow ourselves to live again after loss. Think about it. If your time was now, how would you answer that question? How would you feel? It's time for you to know how to easily move beyond loss so that you can say, yes, I did, and I created a better everyday life. How did I show up after loss? There's another question. Did you show up for yourself? for your family, for your friends, for your colleagues? Or did you let life just pass you by? As I mentioned, my process is the gift of loss. I totally understand. Most people go, Karen, you lost your son. How can you possibly say there is a gift in loss? And you're right. There is no gift in loss. The gift comes after the loss event. Who you become, the life you create, where you go. Are you ready to take a journey to know how you can unwrap your gift of loss? There is a gift waiting for you, no matter what has happened in your life. It's about you identifying the patterns that are keeping you stuck and alone. The first step is to stop. Yeah, complete opposite of keep busy, isn't it? And that's why most people don't get it. It's to stop. I'd like you to meet Daniela. Now, this is not Daniela's photo, but Daniela is an amazing person. She lived an amazing life with her husband. They met in 2006 and they traveled the world working. And they just loved their life. They had both had high-powered careers, and they just went from job to job to country to country. You know, she can speak 4 languages. She's lived in something like 10, 15 countries. And then he got sick, throat cancer. So they decided to settle down in Scotland. And she started, a business. She thought, well, I've got to look after him, but I've also got to work because he sleeps a lot. That's how he heals. So for 9 years, she was his carer, and she started a business coaching career. And after he passed in the middle of 2019, she had the busiest year of her life. She didn't even miss one day with any of her clients. She was there for them, and they actually were thriving just as her business was thriving. Though when I met her, she said, I need your help. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm about to fall apart. Help me. And that's what we did. We took her on the gift of loss process. And in only 2 months, she has completely changed her life. She has a new perspective, a new awareness, a new connection to not only her husband on the other side, but to herself. Because one thing we realized is that she had lost her own identity. Through the whole 9 years, she was his carer. She was a business coach. She had lost her in the process. And that's why she was scared to stop, because she thought, what if I don't even know this person? What if I don't even like this person? What can I do? So as you can clearly see, Daniela is extremely grateful, and she's moved countries. Like in the 2 months when we started working, she has literally changed her whole where she lives. She's done everything that she thought was going to take her 5 years to do. She completed it that quickly because she unwrapped the gift of loss and she got back to her. Are you ready to stop and do the deep dive into you? The second step is to accept. Now remember the Kubler-Ross? That's the 5th stage. This is the second step. So I'd like to introduce you to Kerry. Now Kerry was a person who was actually quite good at accepting. But the things she was accepting were not good for her. She accepted it when multiple boyfriends told her that she would be no good without them, that she wouldn't be able to have a business. She wouldn't be able to hold it all together. She would be no one without them. She believed them so much that when she did lose who she was and she was getting sick and she thought, I've got to do something because I'm not happy. I've got to find some joy in my life. And she got up the courage to leave them. She walked out. She walked out and left everything behind. She didn't even have her own bank account. She just walked out and she found the courage to do that. But the only issue is, and she did therapy. She did lots of therapy. Even while she was in therapy, she met another guy. But it was the same guy in a different body. But he was saying exactly the same things to her. So her self-esteem was going down, down, down. And she was really believing it until she realized that it was time that she accepted that she is the only person she's going to spend her entire life with. So it's time for her to figure out what all this was about, to break those patterns. She had to identify the patterns in order to break them. And through the deep dive, through the unconscious mind loop, she actually ended up finding not only herself, but the most ideal husband. She has the most amazing family now, all because she knew that she wanted joy and happiness in her life. She didn't want to be continually suffering, continually going out with the same person who was bringing her down all the time. And it's not easy. She's the first one to tell you it wasn't easy, but it was worthwhile at 1,000 times. As she said, she's so grateful to have found the way that she could easily come back to her and to live and love her life. She's the most amazing person. The third step is to identify. And for this step, I'd love to introduce you to Michelle. Now, Michelle, you saw earlier on, and you saw the two differences in who she was before to who she is now. Now, Michelle was in a relationship. She was in her second marriage, and she was, how do I put it? She thought she really loved her husband and she thought they had a great life, but she was not happy within herself. She'd lost her own identity, and she was mentally and financially abused because everything was his and he let her know it. Eventually, she got the courage to leave. She ended up sleeping on her 21-year-old son's couch because she walked away with nothing. He made sure she walked away with nothing. And then Michelle and I met, and she went through the process. As she said, she was on her knees throughout the whole process, but she did the work. She did the deep dive into her. She identified these patterns that had been repeating in her life, and they went all the way back to her childhood, to her mum. She realized that her mum, she thought her mum had never loved her, but her mum had, but not in the way that Michelle required to be loved. So she'd created all of these events throughout her whole life, all because she didn't know how to break the patterns. She didn't have done the deep dive, the identify into her. So as you can clearly see, that she has a bright, light lit future, and she's a most amazing person. I'm so grateful to all of these people who I've had the pleasure of working with to assist them to be able to stop, to accept, and to identify. And then the fourth step is to complete. Here's Anna. Isn't she gorgeous? Anna was going through a separation. They'd separated. Her mum had passed a couple of years earlier. Her stepdad had just passed, and she was really close to her stepdad. And she was going through this separation, and she was like, oh my God, my husband and I, or my ex-husband and I, we're not speaking to each properly. We had this 11-year-old son, and we're not showing him that this is the way that, you move from love to loss and then back to love. There was no love, and it was really affecting not only her, but also her young son. And she thought, I have to be able to complete and have an amicable relationship with my ex. I have to be able to complete and move on. And after her seeing me talking about the physical, the emotional, and the spirit part of every relationship, she knew. She thought, this is exactly what I've been looking for. This will help me to show my son that you can easily move from love to loss and still have respect and love for each other without physically living together anymore. And as you can see, she says it was really challenging, but she did the 5-step process and it did change her life for the better. And, she is just going from better to better to better. And so is her son. And so is the relationship with her ex. They can actually be in the same room with each other and talk amicably to each other. Isn't that amazing? Because you think about it, in 15, 20 years, when her son may be getting married, they'll be able to be there for each other, which is so important. I've been to so many weddings where the children are on tenterhooks because their parents are in the same room and they haven't been in the same room for so long. So if you think about it, if that's the only reason why you can figure out how to move beyond any kind of loss, that is the most important one. Do it for your children. Be the example for your children. Show them through your actions that no matter what life sends your way, you have a process where you can easily move beyond loss. And the last step is to pivot. And this is the fun part. This is the part where you get to get out the design board and design a life that you can live and love each and every day. And that's how you come to realize that love and loss are actually equal. One's not higher than the other. They're actually on the same scale, because together we can design your better everyday life. So that is the 5-step process. So can you now see why this is never going to work? Because you haven't done the deep dive into the emotions. You haven't figured out what the message is, what the gift is about these relations, about these emotions. Because without doing that deep dive, you're going to keep having these people come into your life to show you this gift. And isn't it great just to get it so you don't have to keep walking the same path and not living and loving your life? So that's the 5-step gift of loss process. Is to stop, is to accept, to identify, to complete, and then to pivot. As I said, you can clearly see the difference between Michelle. That second photo on the right was taken 2 days after Michelle and I completed her 5-step process. Completely different person, isn't it? She doesn't even look like the same person. It's not just the color in her hair, it's her whole thing about her. You can tell she looks like a deer in a headlight in the one on the left. She looks timid, she looks scared, and she was. She wasn't game to ever voice her opinion. But now she's doing so well. She's started her own business and she's thriving. Isn't that what you want? Maybe not to start your own business, but to thrive. It's clearly the same with me. I have to ask you again, how do you choose to be remembered? Are you going to be the person they actually say, oh my God, no matter what came into their life, they had a process that they knew how to move beyond. So whether it was love or loss, they were always thriving because they deep dived in, they unwrapped the gift of loss, and then they very quickly went back to love. And that's where we find all our joy and all our happiness and all our fun times. And that's what life's about. It's about us thriving. So thank you for being here with me. You can clearly see in the comments how you can connect with me. Let's have a 30-minute free conversation on how you can have a gift discovery session. That's it. That's it. I thank you for being here tonight, and goodbye from me. And remember, life is way too short for anyone to be spending their time grieving and suffering. Now is your time to unwrap the gift of loss and design a life that you live and love each and every day. Goodbye.